So let's get started. I want to welcome everybody to Sony Talks. And this is the third in our series, and I'm really excited that you all could join us. As many of you know, we've been setting up Sony Talks during our period of quarantine as a chance to have conversations, share different experiences, and bring to you our clients, our friends, our colleagues, different experts that normally we don't get a chance to visit with or hear from while working in our business. And today I'm really excited to have Julie Glucksman, who is executive producer, and Will Pascoe, who's executive producer and showrunner for, and I do the Spanish, but I'll make sure I do it right, Absentia. Did I get it right this time?
Yeah,
it's really confusing because it's slightly different in Spanish, but it's the same word.
Right.
So we end up having both of them joining us. For many of you who are fans, and the show has passionate fans, and we're ready to enter our third season. It's going to be premiering this Monday, July 13th on AXN in Latin America and Brazil. For those of you who are like me in Miami, you can catch on Amazon Prime Video as of July 17th. It's really exciting to have this because I remember back hearing about the development and then when it was finally produced in 2017, it was specifically developed for AXN as an international production. And when Marie Jacobson, who is a close friend inside the company, who started to pitch the show, she said, you know, we're taking an international production and bringing many interesting traditional US series storytelling parts to it to make it relatable to a worldwide audience. And the show has been a huge hit for us and around the world. It has some interesting facts that you probably don't pick up on. We know the story takes place in Boston, but it's actually shot in Sofia, Bulgaria. The cast is international. You have well-known talent from around the world. And it's a really fun show. Interesting, compelling. What's great about AXN, what got us excited from the very beginning, it brought Stana Katic, who was also the star of Castle, which was a AXN show, who stars as Emily Burns as she reclaims part of her life, becoming a good mother, taking care of her son, and keeps on developing a storyline. For those of you who haven't watched, I highly recommend you get into this addictive programming. You know, if Amazon is doing it in a third season, they're seeing some very exciting trends with viewers. So what I'm going to do is we're going to give it over to Will and Julie to talk a little bit about Absentia, so they can give a little bit of background, fill you in, share some of the stories. We're going to have some Q&A. If you have some questions, just jot them down, put them in the chat, and we'll try to get to it. So let me turn it over to Julie and Will.
Go ahead, Julie. Okay, I'll go.
Well, do you want us to vamp really, or do you want us to sort of go off of some of the questions?
You can go off the questions, however you guys feel comfortable. I think this is supposed to be a real type of open understanding. I think it's great for people to understand a little bit. I'm going to assume some people might not be as familiar. Others are going to be diehard fans. So giving them the
I can start off. Well, season ended kind of on a cliffhanger. There was a shooting, a sudden, shocking shooting. A beloved character was shot at close range, and we pick up the pieces jumping into season 3 several months later, as we see kind of the fallout of this traumatic event at the end of season 2. And then something new comes into our characters' lives that kind of sets everyone up on this kind of journey that's going to take a number of our characters across the world. The show has been primarily set in Boston. It still is set in Boston, but we're opening up the world a little bit more with some of the storylines and where it takes our characters. So there's a real international feel and vibe to the show, which I think we're very excited about. We think the fans will love. But it's also got a lot of familiar touch tones with some of our characters back in Boston at the FBI. So it's a lot of what fans who have watched the first 2 seasons have come to expect, but also with some new things thrown in that I think will excite and surprise them.
Exciting.
Yeah,
exciting.
I mean, one thing that I can say about the show is that having been there from the origin, it started with this Sony division, the International Networks division, or what was, that division, saying that they were looking for shows that had the, that were, felt like American storytelling, but could really travel, could be all over, could be international, have international appeal. And they were 100% supportive of this show. Okay, wait. I'll just try to keep it broad strokes.
Go.
One of the things that appealed from the very beginning that we hope has been consistent throughout all 3 seasons is the kind of combination of drama and thriller. That it is rooted in this woman's this fundamental triangle in a way. Like, this woman comes back from this traumatic experience. Her husband is remarried. Her child was raised by this other person. And who's behind all the crimes? So always you're hopefully rooted in this kind of family situation and in this character's dilemma, but you're in a hopefully exciting psychological thriller, etc. So that balance of drama and thriller. And that hopefully has stayed consistent in all 3 seasons. But one of the things that has allowed us to evolve and has given us some play within the season within the shows is, one, and most importantly, having showrunners come in and give us their, new take every season, right? Like, we've been able to do a new thing. We've also had different directors. Like, we had one director for season 1. Then in season 2, we had 3 different directors. And what happened was that even though the show is shot in Bulgaria and set in Boston, the second director came in, and in his episodes, we were able to go to Europe. And his episodes had a different flavor, and having the characters in Europe had a different flavor to it. So that allowed us to see, that world, we could encompass that world and let that be part of Absentia world. And then, and then having a different, and then having Will come in season 3 with a really overarching vision of where we could take the show and take the character, allowed the show to sort of evolve from what it was originally to be consistent with what it always meant to be, but, bigger and more involved.
And we were lucky enough, Julie and the other executive producers, including the star of our show, Stana Katic, were open to my idea. I wanted to create a few new characters to kind of come into this world. And one of the characters we created was a new FBI agent, a rookie FBI agent named Gifty Thompson, who's played by a great Scottish actress named Rona Morrison. Because I was interested in this FBI office in which the show has existed in its first 2 seasons. A lot of traumatic things have happened. And I was like, what's it like for a new rookie agent to come into such a unique FBI office as kind of like their first real job? And we could kind of catch up the audience that might be new to the show in a way of playing some of this stuff out through this new character's eyes to bring them into this world. And some of the backstory and history that's there, but also look at our other characters who exist within the FBI with new and fresh eyes. And we brought in a new villain this season named Dawkins, played by Jeff Bell, a great British actor who is menacing and scary in every scene. And then we have another character played by Josette Simon named Rowena, who's got a mysterious connection to our heroes' past from back in their days at FBI Training Academy at Quantico. And then we have this young hacker who comes into our characters' lives and messes everything up with all the best intentions. And her name is Kai, and she's played by Kaja Chan. So we have kind of some new faces coming into the show, but with the family of characters that have been a part of the show for the first 2 seasons. So the world is growing, yet it stayed the same. I think maybe, Julie, you could speak to that. It feels new, but also familiar. So hopefully audiences kind of come along with these new characters and stay with the current characters that they've grown to love over the first 2 seasons.
I have an interesting, because you now opened up something that I've always been curious about, and you as a showrunner, Will, it's perfect for this question. you get a show that has a passionate fan base. So you have these people that from day one, Julie, you'll explain changing people having different types of storytelling, but you have these fans that have certain expectations throughout the story. How do you as the showrunner take into fans and what the storytelling, and how does that impact you? Or is that something you really don't get caught up in? You know,
No,
I've always been curious
I
about
do.
that.
I do. I shouldn't, but I do. I'm on Twitter, and I was paying attention to what the fans were talking about in the show and what they liked. And, you know, I think, you know, it's a difficult dance that people like Julie and myself do. You want to service your own story and your own vision of what you want to do, but you also want to satisfy what the fans want, but you don't want to give it to them in the way they want exactly, because you want them to be surprised. So I paid attention to what people were talking about, what they loved about the show in season 1 and season 2, what relationships they got into, what some of their own conspiracy theories were about some of the bigger mysteries of the show involving these characters and who knows what. So my job coming in was to have my fresh new perspective, but also make it work with the world that Julie and everyone has created beforehand, and also trying to riff on what the fans are enjoying and appreciating about the show and try and give them more of that, but not necessarily in the way they expected or wanted, because you want them to be surprised and engaged and emotional on these character journeys they find themselves in, but ultimately coming to a place where they're like, that's exactly how I wanted things to go or to end up. And I think, without spoiling anything, I think people will love this season. Julie, I'm right, right? Like
You're right.
like I'm totally, I want to be humble about it, but no, I really do think people are their minds are gonna be blown, and I think they're gonna love what they see, because the actors put their heart and soul into it. Our directors were phenomenal. We have an amazing crew in Sofia, Bulgaria, like the A-list of crews in Eastern Europe. And when we wanted big action sequences, they delivered. When we wanted deeply engaging emotional scenes, our actors delivered. And, you know, I and Julie, we'd get emotional watching dailies coming in, because we'd be like, you know, we thought it was good on the page, but now that we see it in the hands of the actors and the director did the thing with the lighting, and it's amazing. And we get caught up in the emotion of it too. And I've worked on a lot of shows where sometimes you're just watching it and you know all the moments and all the moves of the story, and you're like, yeah, it's fine. But, you know, I feel like this season watching it, I was like surprised myself and engaged emotionally in a way that doesn't always happen when you're so close to it, like Julie and I are. You get a little jaded, you get a little burnt out, and you're like, yeah, this is that big moment. But, you know, when we saw it with what our actors did, we were fans and we got caught up in the moment. We'd have a tear in our eye, or we'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe so-and-so said that or did that. Except we know, we've been living with it for months, but then when we see it, we're still blown away as if we're fans and watching it for the first time. So I do think this, what the fans have wanted and craved, and we'll see some of this season, I think will be satisfying to them in a way that is enjoyable for all of us making the show.
Exciting.
Yeah. I mean, listen, Will is very, has a really good relationship with her fans, and, you know, sort of monitors what's, you know, and engages with them and sort of knows what they want. I have none. Like I have no social media presence. I don't follow it. I have no idea what's going on. But what I would say that all of us, you know, had an important sort of north stars always creatively. And one thing that's worth bringing up, whether it's which we hope comes across in the show and maybe helps it feel international, whether you perceive it or don't perceive it, is something that Stana has come into the room with from the very beginning, which is a sense that things are connected in the world in ways that aren't necessarily obvious. That there's no like, obviously we're doing a thriller, right? But there's really no one easy bad guy or one easy good guy or whatever. That, you know, money, corporate interests, governments, you know, that there, when there's corruption, it's usually multifaceted. And that's true all over the world. And it makes the world smaller than you think it is in a way. So, and that's sort of been a guiding light for her and a guiding principle. And I think we've all had kind of guiding lights and guiding principles for the kinds of stories that we want to tell, for relationships that we find interesting and compelling. And just for also just delivering that good old fashioned adrenaline that we also want to be able to deliver.
Yeah. No, and Julie, for you, since you've been there since the origins of this production, really curious in terms of how did you go out and cast? Because you really have a mix of talent from around the world. Basically, it seems like every continent is present. And how do you know who to put? How do you do such a great job in casting it? And also, which leads me, Sofia, Bulgaria? I mean,
yeah.
Why? So those two go intertwined. I think the whole international bit and how you pull it together, please. Explain.
Okay, I don't want to butcher anybody's names, so I'm going to look something up right now. But the truth is we had really, really excellent casting directors from the very beginning.
Sure, yeah.
And they just sent the best, coolest people to us. We did also deliberately try to be somewhat international in our casting because we were aware of our origins. And then the rest is just, people are talented. We got really talented people.
And look, as the new kid on the block, I didn't know anything about Sofia, Bulgaria. Never been there. And then when I got there, I went over a couple of times. And when I got there at the start of shooting, the very first episode we were shooting, very first day, I was just in an elaborate kind of sequence out on location, a couple of locations. And I think, Julie, I turned to you and I was just like, this crew is amazing. And I've been lucky enough in my career to have shot around the world in Europe, America, Canada, and I've seen some great crews. And this crew in Bulgaria was as good as anything I've seen anywhere. And I was really impressed with Bulgaria as a country because we had urban landscapes, cityscapes that we could use, but we could also within 20 minutes be outside of the city and in rural areas that look like different parts of America and different parts of Europe. So I was quite excited by the possibilities of storytelling and geography and where we could take our characters physically, because Bulgaria offered us a lot of things that I was naive about. And this coming season, we're in Boston, we're in rural America, and we're in Europe. We go all over the place, cities, middle of nowhere, and everywhere in between. So the show visually looks great, and we're all over the place geographically. And I think that opens up, as Julie says, the world and allows the characters to come into contact with other people in interesting ways and in interesting places that, again, me as a newcomer to the show, I saw what they did in season 2 when they went to Moldova for a couple episodes. And I was like, we can do more of that. And we should. And we did. Spoiler alert.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to throw in some quick names. Okay, Susie Ferris was our casting director here who helped us with our leads. And then Suzanne Smith out of London did all the rest of the casting. And she and Laura Windows, who helps her out, they did an amazing job casting. The other thing I'll say is, remember, although we were able to get the best, unexpectedly, because we weren't familiar, we're provincial in our way, right? Being from America. We weren't expecting to have such a great crew in Bulgaria, which we did. But remember, we also, for example, season 1, we had a really big Israeli contingent because Oded Ruskin and Maria Feldman. Oded was our director, Nadav Hexelman was our DP, Maria Feldman was my executive producing partner. Tamir Kafir, who's been our producer consistently, our line producer consistently, they were there from the beginning, and we did post in Israel first season. Second season, we did post here. Third season, we had a really strong Polish contingent. We had 2 Polish directors, Kasia Adamek and Greg Zaglinski. And then we had like Polish post-production. We had Polish sound. We had the most amazing Polish sound guy. So we really have had this kind of murderer's row of like international creative contributions. I just got a shiver actually thinking about it. I mean, it's great. Like when Will came to Bulgaria for the first time and he walked down the hall and he saw the sets that the he saw what the production designer and the set designer had envisioned for some of the scenes that he's written, and he was like, "Oh my god!" Right? Didn't you remember?
It's happening. It's real. They're making it.
It's real and it's bigger than you thought. Like there was he wrote one action scene where like the character was supposed to fall off like a little berm or something, and he saw what was designed for it, and it was like, "Oh my god, it's gonna go off a cliff!" You know, I mean, he doesn't go off a cliff. I'm not spoiling anything, but that
because by the time we got around to shooting it, the river wasn't as deep, and they couldn't do the stunt because it was not deep enough.
That's right.
And I wanted the person to fall in and get washed away. They're like, "Yeah, at this time of August, there's such little flow that they'll fall and then they'll just float there and not go anywhere." I was like, "That's not exactly exciting." So we came up with a better idea. The stunt guys did an amazing job, and the fans will see what is in store. But we do some action sequences in the show that are like feature film level stuff that I've never been able to do in TV, and that is what we're able to do in Bulgaria because they do a lot of action movies in Bulgaria. Schwarzenegger, Stallone do a lot of their movies there, so they've just got a crew of people who know how to do big action, big set piece stuff. So once I found out about that, myself and the writers were able to write more towards that kind of big action stunts. And Stana, and Julie can speak to this, Stana is game to do her own stunts. She wants to do her own stunts. She wants to be badass and kick ass, and she does. And she does it over and over and over this season. And I always was kind of thinking, okay, we'll have a stunt double for this. And then I find out, no, Stana wants to do that really crazy action sequence, and she did, and she's amazing doing it. So again, people will be really excited and surprised when they see some of the stuff that's coming.
And I think one thing that I will say that's been a great pleasure is we knew when we hired Stana that she was a really engaging actress.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know. I couldn't have predicted that, first of all, the level of just how wonderful she is, you know what I mean, across a range of different, dramatic situations, but also what a kick-ass action star. I feel like that she would turn out to be such a badass, such an action badass, and how fun it is to watch her do that stuff. So that's been great.
I love the stories. One of the things that you made me think about, so you have these crews in Poland, you're working with people in Israel. You guys have a lot of experience working remotely. So I think a lot of us are going through working remotely now after the 3+ months we've been away from our offices. Can you share any interesting experiences, maybe on season 3 that you had? Were you still filming when we went into quarantine? Like, what was the status, and what are some learnings that you have from working remotely, both of you?
We knock on wood, we had wrapped principal photography mid-December.
Okay.
Right before the world changed, before we knew we were heading to a pandemic. But our vast majority of our post-production was done during a pandemic and remotely. So we had to juggle multiple time zones for special effects, editing, music, sound, all of this stuff.
But we would have had to do that anyway.
Yes, we would have had to have done that anyway.
All of it. Right.
But what we ended up having to do was we had to do kind of remote mixes with people up in Poland, streaming stuff, downloading it to us in real time, watching it, adjusting it real time. It got to a point when, Julie and I would go into our sound place in Los Angeles, and we'd be wearing masks and wearing rubber gloves and sitting 6 feet apart from one another with the air conditioning blasting. And it was surreal. Like, I think I took a few pictures of like my hands on the table wearing surgical gloves, holding a pen, as someone else was in front of me wearing a mask, and someone in Poland was wearing a mask where they were. And I was like, this is 2020. I'm making television in 2020. Yeah. This is what it looks like.
Weird. But what I will say is because Sony actually has a really good media cloud services thing, and because we had a pretty substantial international component, in almost every way, we were just continuing to work the way we had already started working, right? Which is like they would do a cut in Poland, and then they would upload it to Sony, and then we would watch it and we would note it, and then we would talk to them and write them notes, and then they would edit again. And weirdly, because of the 10-hour time difference, it was like a 24-hour machine. You know what I mean? Like it just was going and going. The only things, you know, there were some things that stymied us. Like, for example, we thought, you know, some lessons you learn over seasons, and like we have it together, we're going to bring our DPs over so they can look, you know, when you finally do your color mix, for example, if everybody's looking at a different screen, that is one thing where you kind of, it would be great to everybody be looking at the same screen.
Yeah.
And we finally had all that figured out for season 3, and we were going to get the DPs to come over and like sit in the room with us and like in the directors and actually look at the same screen and and in the end we couldn't do that because people couldn't travel and we couldn't do that. And then in terms of sound, yeah, we, you know, like one of the few things that you have to do, it's great if you have somebody in the room doing sound, and you can hear it and you can, you know, see it with
more bell on the left instead of the right or whatever.
Yeah. And we had
rumble in the explosion.
Yeah. And we were able to do a lot of that, but there were a few like sending actors microphones and them, you know, recording their ADR in the closet. And then luckily we had we have a great sound team. And I think mostly you won't be able to notice it.
Yeah.
Very cool.
There got to a point with the lockdowns where we could not get our actors to get into sound recording studios in London or wherever they were in the world, Los Angeles, New York, to come in and re-record some lines that when we recorded them on the day in Sofia, there was, I don't know, a jet in the background that was making a noise, interrupting it, or a bird chirping or whatever it was. And we couldn't stop the machine because we had air dates and we wanted the show to come out this year. So as Julie said, we mailed them microphones that they could plug into their phones, go into a closet or their car, look at their lines on their phone and record into the phone, and then it would get uploaded to our sound mixer who would listen to them and then clean up the sound. So actors for the first time ever had to do that from home, recording lines from home. Normally they go into a studio, there's a big monitor, there's a sound engineer, the director's there or whoever it is, and you go through it a number of times. Now actors, we were doing it where Julie or I or whoever, the directors would be on an iPad looking at them in their car or their closet as they're recording lines and giving notes and adjustments, and they would do it again. And it was this weird kind of fly-by-night improvised system that we would put together, and it worked out. It was amazing. I mean, there's sometimes at 4 a.m, you're sitting in your car. I had to do this once for one recording session with an actor in London because he was 8 hours ahead and he was coming in at noon and I was in Los Angeles. So at 4 a.m, I got into my car in my garage so I wouldn't wake everyone up, and did his ADR session with him in London. Wow. Then I went back to bed. But that was the nature of this international production, that there's no timeouts, there's no downtime. I think, Julie, you would feel the same. My sense of whether a day was going to be good or bad was how many emails I had when I woke up in the morning. If it was less than 10, it was going to be a good day. If it was more than 10, I knew that there was a lot of things that were going on that I had to be addressing. Yeah. But that's just because when you're asleep on the other side of the world, a whole bunch of people are working on the show. And when you wake up, they have questions or there's things for you to look at or listen to or whatever.
But I need to take a moment to commend you, Will, for being able to stay on top of all that. I mean, like, as a showrunner, there's just a huge amount of not just the main things that are happening, but also the minutia, and you know, Will's ability to kind of be effective across a whole wide range of issues that come up was really invaluable.
Right. I know we're running a little long, and I have to ask a question because, you know, we have a lot of advertisers, people at the agencies, and one, we like to learn from these sessions, and one of the things we'd like your input or thoughts. We do talk a lot about brand integration, and it's a big topic right now in the industry of how to integrate better into program. Are there words of advice, whether from experience you either had in other shows or in Absentia, that you can share, or thoughts that you want to give us that when we're looking at brand integrations, how to work better with creators?
I would say the more organic, the more natural the integration, the better it is. The more it blends into the storytelling, the more it blends into the world of the show, the less egregious or obvious it will feel. I think technology, like literally technology, like phones, computer systems, all those kinds of brand integration things in a television show are fairly easy because those most shows, most contemporary shows, that kind of technology as any of us would on a day-to-day basis. So that kind of integration is kind of seamless and feels right. What's more challenging is when you have to put brand integration and work it into a story where it doesn't fit, where it's not an organic, logical fit, because then you're trying to do mental and storytelling gymnastics to make that integration work. And I think audiences are savvy enough that they can smell that coming a mile away, and they feel like, oh, so-and-so, whatever company is a sponsor or, wanted some kind of branded integration, and it just feels and smells and looks forced. And I think audiences are savvy enough to pick up on that. So when it works, and the James Bond movies do it really well, and I think television can steal a page from the Bond movies, like how the hero is just driving that car, and you see enough of that car, that James Bond is driving a Bentley or whatever it is, or a BMW. So I think television can. I think television can. And Aston Martin. See, maybe it wasn't as good as I thought it was.
No, but you got a BMW. That was a huge one because they did switch to BMW.
Yeah.
Right.
One
okay.
year.
So I was not.
I'm going to add one thing. Will is correct. Like I can just speak to Absentia, but yeah, phones, computers, video games, and in this case, we were cameras. We were super lucky to be working with Sony in that case because obviously the easiest thing is to just go to Sony. But also clothes. Don't forget clothes. That's also sort of organic to what's happening. And if you're lucky enough to have, a star like Sana who can really wear an outfit, I mean, a lot of the time she's just wearing like grungy stuff that she can do action in, but once in a while we got to
But
dress
she still
her.
looks amazing in the grungy action clothing because it's Stana, and she just doesn't ever look like the rest of us do.
Like, and when the guys wear suits, I mean, it's not like we did a lot with clothes, but that is another area where it's pretty easy to do some kind of brand.
I suspect in 10 years from now, we'll be watching television shows and characters will walk through the screen. If we want, we can turn something on our TV or our devices, and it will say suit by Hugo Boss, shoes by whoever, watch is a, and I think that's when you can get kind of this branded integration in a way that if you like the look of something you see on TV, there's a switch, a button you can push, and then you can just see what all those brands are. So if you want that shirt that so-and-so is wearing, you want those shoes that the hero's wearing, you can find that and go and get it. I think that's the world we're heading to.
Yeah.
I feel like people have been saying that for a while, but I don't know. And you guys know. Like, do people really respond to that? Like, do they want to be shopping while they're watching, or is that distracting?
There are times I've watched something, I'd be like, oh, I'd love to get that. What is that? How do I find out what that is? And I go online after and I say, I ask the question to the internet to see if anyone else, and inevitably there's always someone else. What was so-and-so wearing in episode 5 of blah, 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 blah? And I'm like, okay, so it's not just me. So I do think someday we'll get there technologically that we'll be able to just watch in the moment or rewind and go, oh, I want to see what kind of car that was, or whatever it is.
But one thing, I mean, look, in a practical manner, TV moves fast, and getting permission to use products is typically, because of legal reasons, slow.
Yes.
So almost all the time, the advice is don't have a product be recognizable, period. Don't, if there's a brand you're going to recognize, get rid of it. You know what I mean? So that's just a practical kind of issue.
And sometimes you have to digitally remove those brands if you haven't had permission granted by the time you film it, or something snuck in the background that no one saw. Like we saw that a couple times this season. There'd be a painting in the background, graffiti in an alleyway. And we'd be looking at it and we'd be like, is that graffiti cleared? And then it became a thing like, how do we track down who the graffiti artist is in the background?
Right.
And that's not branded integration, but that is someone's art. And someone drew that or painted that, and they should be credited if possible. So some things like that are tricky, but as Julie says, television moves so fast that often we do our best efforts, but it's hard to catch everything. And then in post-production, you have to digitally erase a sign in the background that you didn't realize the camera saw, or the colors and the pattern is familiar, where you can say, well, that's a major brand, international brand. We never got clearance from them because we never thought we'd see that, but clearly it's the so-and-so logo out of focus, deep in the background, but it's there and sharp eyes can pick that out. So that's the world we live in. And when you're shooting in Bulgaria, as soon as you step outside, everything's in the Cyrillic alphabet. So street signs become an issue. Any kind of signage is an issue because it's in the Cyrillic alphabet. So that becomes another layer of complexity.
Yeah. All right. Well, I got to say thank you guys. Thank you for giving us the extra time. It was wonderful. I feel like I've learned a little bit. So
It's a pleasure.
thank you very, very much. Everyone be safe. Enjoy the 4th of July, even though sounds like there's not going to be fireworks anywhere, which is, I guess, a good thing. I mean, so stay safe, keep our distances, and I'm sure we'll see each other soon.
Okay.
All right. So thank you, Julie.
Thank
Will,
you, Irving.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Julie.
So nice
Bye.
to see you. Thank you.
Good to see you guys. Bye-bye. Bye.